All right, so let's call the meeting to order. It's 3:33. So first order of business is going to be to hear, consider, and act upon the minutes from our last meeting on February 7th. Everybody get a chance to take a look at those. Any questions, concerns? Everything looks good?
I thought they were good.
Okay. So having said that, the minutes are approved. So next order of business is, the crux of why we're here, which is to, at our last meeting, we had put together some language. Bill, you were out of town, but the three of us kind of put together some language for an additional tier, which would allow an organization like Connecticut Fury to operate, in a way that they, profitably, without having to pay the out-of-town fees, because they're made up of mostly, they're made up of mostly residents. So, have you gotten the chance to, Bridget, maybe it'd be best if you could just read to everybody what we have so far?
Sure. So it's under Section 36 of Rules and Regs. The suggestion was that we create a new Section E, and the existing Section E will now be Section F. The new Section E will read General Resident Youth and Adult Leagues at the formally recognized organizational level, and then in parentheses, i.e. not a team, so we're talking about leagues, that consists of 90% Fairfield residents. I have to rewrite this, but you get the gist. At the discretion of the Parks and Recreation Commission, subject to approval by Parks and Rec Commission annually. So they would be recognized as down the line, like the tiers, to come before the commission and we could approve or not.
Brian, you weren't at the last meeting. Are you up to speed on some of this language that we were recommending?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up to speed now.
You get the gist?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep you from rolling through, but the 90% rule is for what? For everything? For what is the 90% rule?
Yeah, it would be for anybody that wants to use town fields that are made up of at least 90% Fairfield residents. Right, and we are creating this additional tier to help out the teams that are mostly made up of Fairfield residents, not fully. So that that, and the impetus for that, of course, was the Fury, who has come before the commission a couple of times. They basically can't operate their program effectively or profitably with the current structure for the out-of-towners.
So this relates to pricing and
field availability. Correct.
So 90% plus would allow them to be recognized under our procedures. Yes, that would put them in the second to last tier on our rules and regs. And I'm trying to find, I don't know.
So
That would become D, and then D becomes E?
What is D? Do you have D in front of you?
Yeah, D is any other youth and adult leagues and activities at the discretion of the Parks and Rec Department.
So were we going to keep that the same? And there's a new E, and then E becomes F.
That's how it works.
So that was D, at least what I have here. So A, B, C, D.
Oh.
Is that right?
Sorry.
But the intent wasn't to make it equal to any other tiers. The intent was to have some level of differentiation.
Correct.
Whatever we agree it should be, that would impact pricing and field availability to be determined. And I think the other big piece of it we said was a lot of what's behind this is understanding the intent of these organizations, because we clearly want to push for Fairfield residency, et cetera. We still believe in that model, but that if there are organizations that for some reasons that then the commission could agree based on their intent, based on whatever, then they would be approved I think that was part of what we put in there because we realized we didn't want to create sort of an unmanageable situation where organizations will automatically fall into there because they say so, not because they've explained to us why. And so a lot of the same kinds of questions that we've been asking about intent and possibilities and things like that, we would need to bring that into our assessment. So clearly a challenging area in our whole model, but we were trying to build some controls around it to make sure it doesn't get, unmanageable.
So we have A is Fairfield Parks and Rec department-sponsored activities. B, Fairfield Public School-sponsored activities. C, permanent resident youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of all Fairfield residents. D, general resident youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of all Fairfield residents. And then E is now going to be, you want to read it again?
Yeah, but I feel like I'm missing something. We have to rewrite this somehow.
Okay.
E is going to basically say general resident youth and adult leagues at the formally recognized organizational level that consist of 90% Fairfield residents.
At least
And
90%, right?
At least,
Yeah.
okay. I'll add that. This is at the discretion of the Parks and Recreation Commission, subject to approval by Parks and Rec Commission annually. So they would have to come back every single year and get another approval.
And then that would move E to F, which is any other youth and adult leagues and activities at the discretion of Parks and Rec Commission or their designee.
Okay.
So we're creating an additional tier. So this is mostly for Brian and Bill, who were not at the last meeting. We're creating this additional tier for organizations that consist of at least 90% residents.
Mm-hmm.
And are you building into the rules somewhere definition as to what the Parks and Rec will be looking at in order to make the determination of whether they qualify under E? Because it's very...
It's vague, but it's somewhere else, right? Somebody else, wait, can I see it real quick, Bob?
Section 39, season permits for teams and organizations. 100% of the players must be Fairfield residents, and the team must first be approved by the Parks and Rec Commission. Once approved, an official league roster, a signed copy of the town of Fairfield's hold harmless agreement, and a certificate of insurance naming the town of Fairfield as an additional insured with limits as designated by the risk management department must be provided. So in my opinion, it should be the same as 39. They come before us. They say, hey, we have at least 90%. The commission gives them approval at the tier E level, and then just like all the other teams need to do, they need to provide an official roster, the hold harmless agreement, and the certificate of insurance, which gives us the mechanism to make sure that, nobody's skirting.
So the way the rules work now, teams, and we've been through this recently with a couple of the commission meetings. So the teams that came before us representing 100% residents, they had to present to us for quote-unquote recognition.
Correct.
But it's an objective process.
Correct.
If they say to us they're 100% and we verify or whatever we do, then they are recognized.
Correct.
So by virtue of what you just said, there is no subjectivity, there is no ruling from the Parks and Rec Commission for anyone who comes to us. It's, you are making an objective similar to the full residence rate. So there's no discussion, if you will, who these players are, why they're on the team. It's simply, they're going to present to us, we have 90%, and then they're recognized.
Yep. Okay. That's exactly it.
Well, that's better than keeping it nebulous unless you put a whole series of determining factors for us to,
right.
We can't, unless there's a set of rules, one group comes to us with 91% residents and we approve it, the next one comes in, we can't deny it.
If they meet the threshold,
meet
correct.
criteria, all right,
Yes.
so you're making it an objective.
And make it an objective, which also, I think, takes the onus off of us as the commission, like I keep bringing up the situation of the St. Thomas approval, you know, like those one-off approvals that I think this helps us avoid situations where we have to do those one-offs. Because I don't know how everyone else feels, I'm just uncomfortable with the one-offs, because it's kind of like, there's no basis for, you know, like with the St. Thomas thing.
Yeah.
Right, I approve that, but, you know, what was the basis of the approval? You know, I don't know, I was in a good mood that, you know, there's no objective criteria. This, I think, makes it objective and keeps it nice and clean for us on the commission.
It keeps this clean, don't fool yourself that there won't be one-offs.
Oh, yeah, no, there'll still be one-offs, but for the most part, it keeps it clean.
This aspect of it.
Yeah, correct.
But just then, for clarity, though 100% teams don't come to us every year, once they prove they're 100%, you continue to work with them. But I thought we still said that anyone in the 90% category still needs to come and prove that they belong in that category each year.
Yes.
So that there is a look into their organization each year. They don't just automatically continue to qualify under 90% next year, same.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's some language in there that says they have to come before us on an annual basis.
And Brian's comment was that needs to be an objective view, that where they're proving X, which has to be objective, not subjective.
Does anybody have any issues with that language? Okay, so then I think the next piece is around fees, right? I mean, I don't see, we don't have any fees in the rules and regs, but obviously, Galen, you have the fee schedule. Where did we land last time, Bridget? Did we say $40 a player per season compared to the $25 at the two levels above?
You suggested 35, and I said that I thought it was too low.
Okay. So let's talk about that piece, because I think that's the last remaining piece. If everybody agrees that the language we just talked about and creating a new section D, or a new item D under section 36, you know, we need to figure out what that means from a dollars and cents standpoint.
I think, just to interject a question, so something that could potentially happen that I foresee is, so if this group recommends an additional tier at this 90% residency that somehow gets approved at the commission level, so like a group like Fairfield Youth Football that has like 560 players.
Yeah.
So then what if they decide, oh, great, if we could have 10% non-resident, we could have over 50 non-residents in Fairfield Youth Football. We no longer want to be a tier, I'll just say, you know, 3 group, we want to be now this 90%, like that's allowed. So like groups that have the formal recognition, they could then opt to have non-residents on their team and just pay like a little more per player.
If the league allows that, right? So Fairfield Youth Football does. Little leagues have just started allowing that. So yeah, I mean, my opinion is if they meet the criteria, then yes, they reap the benefits that come with that criteria.
And a higher price tag.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question, specifically to what the example Galen just gave. So if Fairfield Youth Football has 550 participants.
Yep.
10% would be 55.
Yep.
Within an organization, are you saying it's 10% per team within the organization? Or it's within the organization? So, in theory, Fairfield Youth Football can start a new team, a Fairfield County team, if you will, within the organization that is 100% non-Fairfield residents.
Right, it could be below the 55, correct. I don't love that part either, but, you know, I mean, what's the workaround there?
Well, the workaround could be, you know, either something in the language and no single team within the organization can exceed X percent.
We had that. We
more
have
than
it
one
in-
or two players. So what they do with men's softball. Can't have two hours.
Well, that's another follow-up question I have, because if it's 10%, the way the softball is grandfathered, and by the way, softball's come to me to add to the number just yesterday.
Add to what?
Add to the number of non-federal residents, allowed.
Oh, they did.
And see, yeah, probably not. Is there, and just reading through the various categories, the 10% rule, every softball team is allowed, assuming there's 15 on a team and we're allowed 3, that's a 20%. So is there going to be any language in the rules exempting?
Well, so the thing that we need to remember is the softball is Fairfield Parks and Rec department-sponsored activity. So they work through Parks and Rec so they qualify as Category A.
Okay, so we don't have to identify because we never have identified
Correct.
that rule, okay.
I like the idea of measuring it at the program level and then also, and no team, each team has to qualify also, which could say you can have a team that doesn't qualify, but they're not using our fields.
Well, Conference is a good example. I mean, I forget your colleague's name, who was there talking about the 8 and 9 group, but that youngest group, might exceed the 10%, but if the organization stays within 10, it would be sufficient, but you still wouldn't want a single team to be 50% non.
No. So so I think as an organization, we set it at 90% residents. What do we think is the appropriate criteria for an individual team
Within that program.
Measured at 90% and rounded up to the nearest player. I mean, you could do something like.
Or 10% of your roster. So like, for example, football's 11, so you can have one player out of town. Softball's 10, you can have one player.
So you're saying
But the roster's gonna be more than that.
Well, no, it's starting lineup, your starters. I'm just trying, because you have football, I mean, like, when I've been learning something, we had 35 kids. So, we're on the team. That's our max for sophomore winter. So now you can have 3.5 out-of-towners on one team.
If you put people on the team who would never show up.
Yeah.
Do we need to add that?
Well, I think, so we want to avoid the situation where we have, to Galen's point, Fairfield Youth Football is 500 players. They could, in theory, with this, put together a super team, to your point. We want to minimize that. So we've already done that. Organizationally, you have to be at 90%. I mean, do we make it 80%?
Yeah, I would think that's fair with
no one team
exceeding
20%.
I think that just keeps it
Objective.
safer.
Yes, I agree.
So we need to rewrite this then.
Yes.
Okay.
General resident, youth
Youth
and
and
adult
adult
leagues and activities that consist
Yeah,
of,
right.
Activities.
that consist of at least 90% or more Fairfield residents, with no team having more than 80% non-resident, no more
Then 20%.
than 20% non-resident, sorry.
Okay. 20% non-resident.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I think we should, just to, again, to play it safe, at the discretion of the Parks and Rec Commissioner or their designee.
Yep.
So that would be bullet point number E.
Okay.
Okay?
Got it.
You want to read it back?
Not yet.
Hey, this is Anthony. Just listening in. I came in late, but can I just chime in?
Of course.
Yeah.
So for what you just stated for a roster, for an individual team, so if a football team has 30 players, 80%, that means they could have 6 non-residents.
Say it again, Anthony?
Yes, that's true. If the suggestion is if the program in total is within the 10%, then
Yeah.
theoretically, a single team could have up to, in your example, 6 players, a 30-man roster.
Right, and that would cap those guys out if they had 600 players at 60 with the 90% overall. So 6 of those kids could be on one team, or however that ends up working out, but you're allowing them 60 players, 60 non-resident players.
According to the 10% rule, that's what they're
Yes.
suggesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would be adamantly opposed to that. I haven't really got a chance to hear Galen's take on it, but I mean, that to me sounds like a large number.
Well, it could be in the case of a big program like Fairfield Youth Football, right? But if we look at all the other leagues.
Baseball's gonna be the same. I mean, how many kids are?
Yeah, there's 400 in each of the boys' little leagues, and then there's 600 or so in the girls' little league. So again, it's another 60 players we're now allowing girls' little league to play, and we know Little League International allows surrounding towns to play in other towns by their rules. We don't allow it currently with our rules, but
Correct. Yeah,
You know,
I mean, yeah, that is true, what you stated, I mean, the numbers that you stated there are, this is what the rule, they basically can operate that way, given this new provision that we're trying to put into the rules here.
yeah, no, I know Fuse is about 600 people as well. So again, I'm just adding up 60 to each of these programs, and I'm not saying they're all going to take advantage of that immediately, but I think once they realize they can, why wouldn't they? What's to stop them from bringing in ringers from other towns to strengthen their travel programs?
Well,
Their all-star teams.
So do we think that there are, these provisions, C and D, in our current rules and regulations is what's preventing them from doing that now?
In our current regulations, yes.
Yeah. I mean, but in the scenario you use, right? So historically, like today, let's just use, a league that has 400. So they have 400 residents paying $25, right? So that's $10,000. So if they meet the next criteria, if they want to expand their program and bring in these out of towners, those 400.
16.
What's that?
16.
16 what?
What is the number you're gonna come up with?
Oh, you're doing the math for me? Oh, thank you. Times, if we said 40, for example, so, yes, there's more out-of-towners on our fields, but we're compensating for that with additional revenue for the town.
But yeah, I get that, and the additional revenue is a nice benefit, but obviously it doesn't come close to offsetting any of the real fees associated with maintenance of fields. I'm just more worried about field space than anything else, and that's why these rules were put into place in the 80s. It was because we didn't have enough field space, and that's why, in the early 2000s, they cut back on the adult softball, and they got rid of the industrial leagues and the all of that. I mean, I don't think we have less than 5 players right now in our adult softball league that's still grandfathered in. And field space is still an issue. But, so I mean, I'm just looking at it from a field space issue. Never mind, and again, each of these teams, each of these leagues, if they add 60 players, I mean, that's 2 or 3, 4 or 5 teams in some situations in some of those leagues. And again, I'm not saying they're going to do that right off the bat, but I think they will.
Anthony, one of the things that might prevent an organization, besides the incremental cost, which is nominal if you spread it out to that many people, if it goes from 25 to 40 as you're recommending. But these programs would be dropped down in the pecking order for field space.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But yeah, and not to cut you off, Brian, and that sounds good to me. I'm good with these teams falling to the bottom of the pecking order, provided a pecking order is established and followed. Because I think Galen will tell you right now that she allocates fields evenly, for the most part.
Well, you don't have the category that the subcommittee is suggesting right now.
Right.
If that category existed, then I would think that Galen and company would have to, exhaust everyone on the higher categories before the subcategories came to the table.
And I think it's a separate, I think talking about creating a new tier and the qualification to get into that tier is one thing, and that's what we've been working on. I think it's a separate thing to decide what would be the rates for that tier, what would be the field availability, because you can't create a tier and disrupt your current revenue streams, your current field allocation. I think once we figure out sort of who fits into that, and we want to recognize and give them some value, different than what's below them, what's above them, then I think it's a separate initiative to figure out what would that mean for rates, what would that mean for field availability, and we should work on that. But to do that, you have to look at, if you lower some rates, maybe other rates have to go up. If you give more field availability, then there's less for others, and I think we'll have to be careful about how we do that, and we'll need more input. But I think if we try not to confuse the creation of the tier and the qualification to get into that, and then once we can establish that, then say, okay, what benefits does that give that group? We want them to be better than these groups, but not as good as these groups. Well, what does that mean? And I think there's some give and take there. And I think Galen, you'd have to work with us on what would that mean in terms of, and when can we put that into place, given that you're in a budget year and that sort of thing.
But let's also keep in mind that, right, the three organizations we all have in mind when we're talking about this are the the Falcons, the Nationals, and the Fury, who have been using our fields already for the last couple of years. They were doing it inappropriately. I'm not saying that it was something that it was devious or they had bad intentions, but so I think we've established that our fields can support those three teams. So now we're we're creating a new criteria for teams that, like Fury, that don't meet the 100% residency, but are made up of 95% young Fairfield girls.
Just one more thing, I'm sorry. The other issue that I think is going to be a challenge for Galen really is checking rosters. Right now, when somebody claims to be 100% residents, it's very easy for some other league or resident to call out the non-resident on the team. When you start putting a percentage on a roster, I think it's trickier that, now they're supposed to have 2 non-residents, but you know what, they actually had 4 and they just left 2 off the roster. Again, a lot harder for somebody from the outside who has really no idea what the roster is. And I don't know that Galen's going to be at every one of these fields or any of them. So I just worry about the enforcement of this.
Yeah, enforcement is definitely, we talked about it that last time too, Anthony. But I think there are mechanisms in place for that. So, for example, the Nationals and the Falcons are going to play in the East Shore League. So, they need to provide a roster to them. I don't want to create any work for anybody, but I think there are checks and balances. You can also, in addition to checking with the league on roster, the league in which they participate for rosters, you can also take a look at Game Changer, and just do a quick sloppy QC just to make sure that what you've been provided is actually what the case is. But you're right, there is room for, that does create a little bit more, that creates more work for Galen, and there is the potential that somebody could take advantage of that, no doubt.
We had talked also about having significant penalties if caught cheating.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody does get caught cheating, are we willing to put a stake in the ground and say, that's fine, you cheated on your roster, you lied, you get no fields next year?
Yes.
or you fall to the absolute bottom of the, I think the higher the penalty would hopefully keep people
That can be
from.
hard for, you tell whole baseball leagues
I
are
know.
out, because one coach,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, but one
the coach has to be suspended or,
Yeah, but the
you know.
coach, his team rolls up to the organization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the rules that
Yeah,
suggests that right now?
yep. A violation of these policies will result in forfeiture of permits and fees, section 43.
For that year specifically? Because we're talking about approving these teams and leagues on a yearly basis.
And that's all it says, so, a violation of these policies will result in forfeiture of, so
I would think it would pertain to the current season.
correct. That's how I would read that.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good slap on
But I
the
mean,
wrist.
while we're in here, maybe we want to tighten section 43 up.
Sure.
Violation of these policies, the times will result in forfeiture of permits and fees for the current season
Mhm.
as well as the upcoming season.
Oh, harsh.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, we have a field shortage,
I
right?
would say a year. Because
But
that
then-
would take into consideration.
Yeah,
I think we have to,
Unless, you find someone out prior to the playoffs or the last game, if you allow them back in the
Yep,
next year,
yep.
it's not a substantial penalty.
Yeah, I like that.
I think the year thing, I think that needs to be tightened up a little bit, just because that could fall in the middle of the season, and then we're like, oh, it's July, and then you get your fields back,
No, because that would kill them for two seasons.
Yeah.
The remainder of that season
and the following
and
season.
the next
Yeah.
season.
Okay.
Because if it's a calendar year,
Mhm.
Correct.
not
What if it was something like,
a year, 12 months, not
Mhm.
the calendar year.
Right.
12
Right,
months.
12 months, yes.
like, just for example, what if it was Fairfield American and it happened to be during the summer, right? They have fall ball, so what season are we talking about? Are we talking about summer and fall of that year? Summer, spring of next year? Like, that's why I'm just saying,
I think to Brian's point, the calendar
Calendar
year,
year.
from when the violation occurs,
okay,
12
Okay.
months, moving forward.
All right,
for the-
let me-
For the organization.
For the organization,
okay. And this is section 43?
correct. So I think we just, a violation of these policies per park rules and regulations or town ordinances will result in forfeitures of permits and fees for one full calendar year, starting at the time of violation.
Okay,
Forfeitures, field and
Okay.
preferential fees?
fields and,
Does it actually say fees?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So we're not forfeiting fees. They forfeit fields, but also then they lose their,
permits.
but they lose their
And
blanket
the fees.
permit, they could still call in, right? They could still drop to the
Field
bottom.
usage?
Or we can't completely shut off the program.
Yeah,
Then you basically go back to the bottom and say, you
well, no,
can call everything.
then it's
you
on
can't tell
them.
500 little kids, one guy made a mistake, that the rest of it,
Wow,
you know, I mean, that's.
are we talking about a mistake, or are we talking about something?
Well, you're talking about
Yeah.
you're gonna have one person, trust me, but. there's a
Okay,
rule for the whole-
and then that
whole league.
organization
Yeah.
would have the right to come before the commission and appeal it.
Yeah.
And
Okay, yeah.
if they say, hey, look, here's our records for the last 20 years, and it's this,
Yeah, I just-
this
yeah,
one
I
guy,
think we
Bill
gotta have,
Llewellyn, who,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, we can't just shut, I think we're gonna get a lot of pushback, if, hope we shut a league down for a whole year.
Yeah.
Well, but that's what's in our rules and regs right now.
Yeah.
Right?
But one bad apple could bring down a whole league, and coaches might not know it.
Preferred fees.
Well, I think
You know.
then, if they come before the commission to, like, when the Nationals and the Falcons came before the commission, we need to just, are you aware that if you violate these rules, it will result in forfeiture of your permits and fees for the, whatever we decide?
The organization has
It can only be
a
reinstated by
registration process,
Full
Yeah.
commission.
the.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on that.
And, if there's one bad apple who has 12 kids registered, and then he puts uniforms to 3 other kids without going through the registration process.
I mean, I think it's
That's
got
gonna
caught,
take down
I'm
the
playing against a
organization.
team, and I know they got 3 guys, who haven't been here, I mean, I think the coaches will catch that. You would
How
hope.
many times have you played a
Travel.
team with number 42s? Like, where did they all come from?
So I have one more thought before I have to drop off. So, and I don't know if it was Galen or somebody mentioned this, but a Fairfield National, a Fairfield American, or Girls Little League right now who are paying nothing, technically, to the town. They're not paying $25 per player. If they wanted to opt into this new category and take non-residents, because, again, their international laws allow them to do that, they'd pay the new, whatever the new rate is, $40, $45, whatever you guys said.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, should we now start charging the 3 little leagues per head rather than, the maintenance projects every once in a while that we partner with? Because they're going to want to go this route, and we don't have the current ability. Well, we currently don't charge them, right? That's my point. So if they wanted to allow the non-resident in their league now, which again, by their laws, they could, how are we handling those?
How are we managing that now, Anthony? So,
Not allowed.
What's that?
Not allowed. If they want blanket permits, they have to be 100% residents. So that's what we've told those 3 leagues, and they've all complied because the blanket permits are most important to them.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking now that they have the ability to opt into this paid category, I mean, they may say, hey, we'll pay $40 per person because it makes sense for us with our 600 kids to take another 60 non-residents and make, super strong all-star teams and go back to the World Series. Again, that's the way I'm thinking if I was running one of those leagues, but I'm not sure. Again, they don't do a project with us every year.
But then they're paying the registration fees because they're in this new category, but the current arrangement still applies. They're still maintaining the fields, right?
No. So what they do is, and Galen, can you speak to this since you deal with this every day?
Yeah, of course. Fairfield American, they pay for the capital improvements and maintenance projects and linings at Mill Hill. National takes care of Tungsten Little League, and Little League Girls Softball takes care of Doogie-Yellow. And to Anthony's point, I think every single group right now that's formally recognized is going to opt into this new tier. And I think that groups that are currently paying the, hourly field rate are going to opt into this tier as well. So I almost think it's going to move everyone into just one tier.
Okay.
But who is going to qualify for this tier that currently doesn't?
Hypothetically, any of the baseball teams.
None of those travel programs meet the 90% threshold. Wolfpack, none of them. Because their model is their regional baseball factories, all-star teams, whatever you want to call them. So, but again, if they meet the criteria, right, like if Wolfpack does have 90%, then, I think they get to take advantage of that if it's in our rules and regs.
They could have one team though, they can come with just one team and say, we're team X, whatever, and we have 90%.
It's got to be their organization, the entire organization. It can't be on a team-by-team basis.
Okay, well, to your point about the projects, I think that we should continue, I think it would be right to continue those projects because you're really sort of allocating those fields on a consistent basis to them, right? So Fairfield American doesn't have competition that other people are coming in and grabbing Mill Hill. Maybe National might want to grab Mill, but so to get that right to be sort of have that field,
Like a home field.
then we need you to continue with the project. So I think that's separate then.
And Jamie, to your point, what I would do here is, if I was Galen, is I would allocate those all the Little League fields to anything Fairfield National wants or Fairfield American or Girls Little League. I would give them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bother truing them up anymore. Again, this is what I would do. And I would basically freeze out these other programs. I know Galen wouldn't do that, but what's to stop these leagues from doing that?
I don't follow. Can you help me understand that scenario again?
So historically what has happened is, Fairfield National will request all the fields on their side of the town, 7 days a week from sunrise to sunset. And we used to give them those blankets.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I got tired of driving around and seeing fields sitting empty because, Fairfield National just, didn't have a practice scheduled for tonight. But they never told Galen that, hey, that we're not using the field. Because right now what they do is she follows up with them every couple of weeks and says, hey, true up your permits this week. Where are you really going to be? And those are the fields that then open up for these other programs. And that's how, the Fury and other groups are getting fields. They're calling in 2 weeks in advance and finding whatever's available because they've been trued up. I just don't know that there's any incentive for these other organizations to true up their permits anymore if they're sharing those same spaces with these other teams that have non-residents. Mm-hmm. Whether that's right or wrong, that's kind of what I see happening.
So you're going to end up having to allocate the fields for practice times, right? And between all the organizations that are looking for those fields, rather than doing these blankets.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And to what you were saying, that will actually drive up field utilization by
Correct.
doing that. So that's we could put that in the good column, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic.
Yeah, because I think, if you look at, let's say, national, so you have National Little League, National Travel, and now they're competing. What's to stop them now from saying, you know what, you could have a practice once a week, now we got travel, so now we're going to cut down field space, we're going to give more time to travel. I think what's going to happen in the long run, we're going to short the kids that are sort of at the end of the bench. We're going to force those kids out because you're going to be bringing new kids in, pushing them further down the bench, less playing time, less exposure, and so I think in the long run, I think it hurts the kids on the fringe. They're going to push them out of sports.
Adding this new tier, you think is going to do that?
I think so, because you're bringing kids in from out. If you bring 60 kids into a football program, change a team.
Okay, but let's look on the flip side, like Fury, right? They have how many girls, Ellen? 70 girls. 64 of them. 64? 66 are residents. They can't play in our town now because the fees that they are facing are prohibitive. So yes, I guess there are going to be people out there that will look to take advantage, but I think we need to set rules for the people that are following the rules. And I would just feel terrible about having 66 girls not be able to play in this town because we didn't create a new tier because we were nervous that people were going to act poorly. They were going to, they weren't going to do the right thing. I don't think.
I'm okay with the tier, but I'm saying national right now, they're 100% Fairfield,
Yeah.
Travel and Little League.
Yeah.
So they don't have, they have a blanket permit. They're different, they're not part of that tier.
Yeah.
If they decide to go that way, they will, but right now, what I'm saying is Little League, American and National, you're gonna see, they're gonna start going more towards favoring the travel teams and less for the little kids playing.
But that's not related to the rules. That's related to travel as it is. We're seeing that right now where kids are opting out of Little League to play travel.
Right.
That's not because of these rules. That's just because of the nature of travel and this whole idea that if you don't play travel, you're at a disadvantage, which, by the way, is BS. So I don't think what you're saying is a function of these rules here. That's just the nature of how travel works.
If they move down, if National Americans say, you know what, we're gonna move down to that tier of 90%, then it does. If they stay where they're at, they're fine, but when they move down, and then why do they look at each other and say, you know what, why don't we just both move down? We're going both for the same fields. There's not another league coming in with 100% Fairfield kids are gonna take the fields from us, so they have to give us the fields.
Well, but they drop down.
But who goes above them?
Well, it's at our discretion, right? Like we have we have been accommodating all three of these travel programs on our fields for the last 5 years at least. So, I don't know that I don't know that this is gonna create a situation where.
Yeah, but what Bill's saying is if they both move down, it doesn't impact them from a field space point of view because they've cleared out that upper tier of teams. So there's no higher tier team or program taking the space. So then the whole space falls down to.
But it's the same number of teams we're talking about.
I know, but now you have the teams who have, are, in essence, they could collude and, they could all agree to do this. They all drop down to that tier and now they're all requesting the same fields that they did previously.
Yeah, and then we have it here at the discretion, that's when Galen can say, we don't have the field space. So the people that pay when we don't have the field space are the people that are at the bottom of this hierarchy.
But what Bill's saying is, why would Galen say we don't have the field space, because there's no one taking the fields?
Yeah, there's no one there now.
There's no one in the higher bracket.
Okay, but, so then maybe I just don't understand, what is the harm if the Little Leagues do that?
You're gonna have
More
a number of Fairfield residents who are not going to be able to participate if they're still maintaining a 15-player roster, and now they take in 2 players from a neighboring town. That means 2 Fairfield kids can't play.
Yeah. I think we're talking about scenarios that could happen, but things that we need to deal with when they come due. I'm uncomfortable making 66 Fairfield girls who want to play travel softball in this town have to go elsewhere because we are too rigid and we can't build in a tier here that yeah, is it perfect? No. But I think that there's enough there where we're creating something of value for the people that want to participate, but it's also in the interest of the Parks and Rec Commission in the form of additional revenue. That's fine.
I think you're opening Pandora's box here. I think it's...
So does this mean that, are we gonna keep section 36 as is forever? Like, there's no changing of this? Right, we're talking about what if scenarios that are probably not gonna happen. Maybe they will, and if they do, that's our charge here. We're the commission. We can say, okay, we made a change, it didn't work, it wasn't the stopgap that we wanted to. We can be nimble and make changes again to help, I don't know,
That's why part of what we were talking about is we know this is gonna be, if we make changes, we're gonna have to see how it all works.
Yeah.
And we had said, that's why we started talking about annual, sort of, agreement that you fall into that category. We didn't want to get a runaway train. At one point, we had sort of talked about whether we want to have something different for not-for-profits or not, and that was a way to somehow distinguish between some of the organizations that are again, more, less Fairfield-centric, but do not, not a profit organization would be more inclined to build super teams. I think, is what I've seen.
What profit organizations reserve fields?
So the Parks and Rec Commission just gave formal recognition to the Falcons, which are for-profit.
They are for-profit
Mhm.
and national. Yeah. Okay, they're both for-profit, correct.
That's it?
I would have to double check, but I know that like FUSA, lacrosse, football, American, National Little League Girls Softball, those are all classified as 501c3.
I assume that the majority, if not the entirety of, I didn't realize they were for-profit, but yeah,
And the Wolfpack, for example, would be profit.
They're not a 501c3.
Right,
They're
and the clubhouse and,
No, I just, personally, I didn't understand why we were gonna change our rules for one group. And, we support girls playing, that's not in question at all. I think our office's standpoint was that they should remove the non-residents and get the formal recognition.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to do it, right? But we've heard from them that they can't field the teams they want to. So, I don't know, clearly I'm in favor of a new tier. I don't see the harm in creating a new tier, especially knowing that it's gonna be increased revenue for the town. And we're allowing, and it's helping residents of this town play the sport that they love, even if they're in an organization that doesn't adhere to the 100% rule. And let's be honest, it's harder in girls' sports to field the teams that the boys do. It just is.
My daughter plays college lacrosse, 13 girls, her game last night, one girl got hurt, now they're down to 12.
Yeah.
There's a game coming this Saturday, one girl can't make it, so they're gonna be down a girl for the whole game.
Yeah,
My kids were all.
You know, so I understand that, you know, I mean, I
Yeah,
understand.
My kids were all lacrosse players at Ward, and so see, when they came in as freshmen, they recruited the hell out of it, of all their friends who were, you know, reasonable athletes who wanted to give it a shot, because, you know, without, you know, them going out there and grabbing a few additional able bodies, they might not have had a team.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's an age-old problem.
Yeah, and I think this tier helps solve that.
So back to your point, so we're here, this whole initiative is because we subjectively believe there's a program that should qualify, and we're trying to build an objective model around that.
Correct.
And I think that's where we're having our conflict. And if we maybe decide as a commission to say, how about if we have the ability to subjectively review a program that requests, and based on that, and we can define our model, because a lot of it's, again, about the intent and about the market, and there's a lot of things, it's subjective. And if we say we have the ability to have a subjective process, and we can, on a one-off basis, approve for 1 year that you get into that program, then all this whole thing about trying to create an objective goes away. Now, we could publish our criteria. It can be high level, almost like a business review. Tell us about your program, tell us about your teams, your rosters. Why can't you fit 100% Fairfield? Okay, we understand that. We agree, you're good for next year, and because it's subjective.
Well,
In their case,
we tried
it's a
that,
good argument.
right? We
Football
tried that,
wouldn't be a good argument.
and it didn't happen.
But I don't think we have that ability under today's rules. I don't see anywhere that says we can, as a commission, if somebody isn't 100% Fairfield resident, I don't see anything that says we could review and approve for a year. And just define what that review is. Because I think we all feel like we want to do something good, but we're trying to put rules around it, and the impact is too great, the potential impact.
So you want that added to the rules?
I'm saying, don't create another tier.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, if we need another tier, that's fine, but a
But
tier
do
would have.
basically what we did with St. Thomas.
But don't create rules of how you qualify, make it a subjective review and approval based on a model, and we could define that model. We could define, here's 10 questions we're gonna ask you. Come before the board and answer these 10 questions.
Yeah, but we tried that just recently with Fury. They came before us and didn't even get a second on the motion that David made. Right? They said, you know, here's what we're asking. We're asking for an exception. And this didn't even go to a vote.
But we were, I think it
We were
was
in the process of this.
because we were
Yeah.
in the middle
We're trying
of
to- True.
trying to
Solve this.
rewrite these rules.
Yeah.
I think if we formally said, this is a process in the rules,
I think that the
and do
St.
that for a
Thomas
year.
scenario is a better example here, just because it was approved, and, I mean, it's not fields, but it was the same idea of getting like a blanket permit for tennis courts that were, you know,
Because of the environment, we said, okay.
Right.
Because they're not.
and we approved like a special pricing for them.
And
Yeah.
the tennis courts,
Well-
we reviewed the permit requests for the tennis courts, and they weren't being used.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but that's a perfect example. St. Thomas comes to us and says, hey, we want to use your tennis courts, but we don't have enough money to do it. Can you help us out? Sure. Fury comes to us and says, hey, we want to use your fields, but we're not 100% residents. Could you help us out? And we're like, sorry, right? That's why I think making something objective, and that's why something objective is so attractive to me. It's like, here's the 90% threshold. Do you meet it or not? If you don't meet it, sorry, you fall down to the last one. If you meet it, good. Then here are the fees you pay. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, this group here is not gonna decide it, right? We need to bring this to the commission. So, you know, I mean, does everybody agree that the tier that we have, the language for the tier that we've come up with is enough to go to the full commission for a vote?
I do. It also has to go to the lawyer.
Town attorney, yeah.
Town attorney, yeah.
It needs to go to the town attorney first.
First, or,
Yeah.
or,
first,
Yeah.
because he needs to tell us whether or not that language is gonna be legal and hold up in court when someone
Yeah.
sues us.
Okay.
Do you guys wanna discuss fees?
Yeah. I mean, I think 40% is, for $40 is, what is that over, is that a 40% increase?
60%.
I mean, Anthony, are you even allowed to change does the town governance allow you to change your fees in the middle of a budget year?
Yeah, I think that, well, I think the number is so minuscule that we actually collect that, you know, in the $370 million budget, it's not a huge deal. You know, we are on, yeah, I mean, we're in the middle of a fiscal year, so obviously for fields, I would prefer, again, you can make this change, you know, go into effect as of, you know, July 1, which wouldn't have any effect on this budget. That would be the next budget that we're in the current approval process of right now. If that makes any sense to you guys.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to, excuse me, I worked in.
Okay.
But before I go, and it's your subcommittee, you guys come up with whatever you think, for presentation, but, I think it's, unless we tighten up the rules, the 10% from an organizational point of view, which would allow multiple, even 20% for an individual team within that organization is problematic to me. The 10% is problematic to me. The fact that, you know, per most of the discussion, if you went from $25 to $40, if, you know, because 25 for fees for the year for an organization, $25 per player is a minuscule, it's a nominal, de minimis amount, and $40 is also, if you look at it times 600, you're coming up with big numbers, but on an individual player point of view, the difference between going from 25 to 40 is also insignificant. So, and if you have something as insignificant as that, it may put the competitive drivers of these organizations into a position where they say, hell, yeah, we'll pay that extra, you know, big deal. So the individual players have to pay $15 more. Let's do this because little Bill from East Bend can hit a home run every time he gets up. And no, I'm sorry to say this, but the Fury, we talked about Fury. The Fury cut Fairfield players that they said were, because it was a safety. Yes, the youngest group might not have been able to field a team, but I don't know if that same would be true for all the teams, because there were Fairfield residents who wanted to participate in the Fury that were told, you're not good enough. And they brought in other players. So there may only be a small handful of players in that organization that are from out of town, but that handful could have been even smaller. If they came to us and said, we have 3 players in the organization because in the 8 and 9 program, we only had 9 girls who tried out, I think as an organization, again, we're Parks and Rec, we want to see the kids on the field. We might have viewed it differently than if they presented from an organization point of view, and we knew that they cut for girls in those other teams. So I think knowing that adds another element of, you know, that's a problem, and that's exactly what Bill was saying about the Little League teams. If we allow that, well, then there may be a Fairfield kid that gets cut. And now he's no longer involved in baseball because they Little League didn't have a space for him because that one player from Westport.
It's back to
took his spot. So I
subjective.
do think, and clearly this is gonna put a lot more burden on Galen and her team. So I think we're gonna have some difficulties. Now, there's 4 of you, and, you know, we know that there's a couple members on the commission who don't always show up for commission meetings. So, we have 2 absences on the next commission meeting, means that you guys could, in theory, control the vote. So you guys really have to consider all of these things before you come to the commission.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know clearly you feel very strongly.
Yes.
You guys are questioning different things.
But also, again, these scenarios where we might be cutting off 1 or 2 is at the expense of the 66 that we're currently potentially leaving off of Fairfield Fields. Right? So it's
But
like,
the 66 didn't have to be only 66. It could have been 68 and 2 on the 8-9 program.
oh, okay, yes, I mean,
It's the same thing when, many years ago, Fairfield, Pop Warner came to us. And they wanted 1 kid from the, St. Thomas, or, you know, I forget, I think it was St. Thomas kid, to play. And the people who ran the organization did enough diligence that they had a friend, the person who ran the organization had a friend of theirs who happened to be the brother of one of my best friends from high school, call me and say, hey, Brian, how you doing? You know, can I talk to you about it? I haven't spoken to the kid since high school. And he said, could you do me a favor? So there will be, as soon as there's rules out there, whether you want to believe it or not, there will be people who
Sure,
are
no, I believe
circumventing, and there's no way that this one kid, they wanted this one kid to participate because he was just a run-of-the-mill kid, it was a divorce situation, and his friends were here, or anything like that.
Mhm.
It was clearly a superstar.
Right.
That they pushed that hard to get to us.
but as a commission, we have the ability to identify those and make changes.
Now, if you keep it objective. Now, if you say, we
Well,
give
then
you
we
90%.
then we change 90 to 95, whatever it is.
Okay.
I don't think, I think we should you know, we gotta make some changes, in my opinion. I think we should agree on whether or not this tier is appropriate, what the language looks like. Send it to the town attorney, get feedback from the town attorney, and then we go to the commission and see what everyone else has to
The
say.
beauty of the commission is everyone's opinion counts
Right.
for one vote, so
Right.
that's your opinion, someone else's opinion is going to
Exactly.
be different, so you
Yes.
just put together whatever you want and bring it.
If it fails at a vote, fine, at least but I don't think that it's, fair to the girls that wanna play, or anyone, for us to just not consider putting it in because of what-if scenarios that may or may not happen.
Okay. I've lived through a lot more of the what-if scenarios over the last 15 years of being on this commission.
Yeah, but we have the ability to make those changes if we want to.
Not if it's 100%.
Sure we do, Brian, we go, instead of 90%, it's now 95.
Okay, but it's still going to be, if it's 100% objective, that may be one player on a team rather than 2. And that one player, at the end of the bench may still.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
if it's a special situation, the 8 and 9 group, for the Furies, I think I would be more inclined to work with that exception than from an organizational point of view to go to 90 or 95%.
Yeah.
Well, then, why did it not even come to a vote at the last meeting? No one even seconded the motion.
I think
no one
it's
wants to
because,
support it.
well, no, I think it had to do with the fact that we knew we were gonna have another meeting and no one wanted to make any,
All right.
you know.
I think there was also confusion because that one case came up to us many different ways, many different flavors. And as Brian was saying, if it came in a flavor that appealed to our sense of understanding the program, that they're trying to do the right thing, and with an open book, I think we should have a right to approve that.
I have
So,
All right, see you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I have 7
you traveling soon? What? You're going away soon, aren't you?
Not for,
Oh, I
not
thought-
until, March 21st.
Oh, I thought, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't think of that.
Hey, Brian.
All right, we'll see you.
See you next meeting.
So, we're talking in circles here. Can we all agree that we put this, we give this to the town attorney, let's bring it to the commission? If it fails to the commission, fine, we made. But I don't feel right about telling 66 girls you can't play on our fields in town.
I don't think it's gonna come to that. As Brian was saying, if it has to come to make one exception for the team that has needs one out of town to have field their team, I think we could probably make that exception, but for just to make a
Well,
blanket for the
I
whole
mean, for me,
league.
if we could
Well,
roll.
when are we
I think
gonna
what
do
the
that?
12-year-old team has all Fairfield residents, right?
We're in March already. The season starts in April, right? So we gotta send this to the town attorney. If we don't resolve this anytime soon, they pay $100 an hour, right?
Well, I would hope they were gonna resolve this.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. So how does everyone feel about the language that we talked about, that Bridget wrote down, sending that to the town attorney, getting feedback from the town attorney? If he says, yeah, you know, if the commission supports this, and then we bring it to the commission.
I'm in favor of it.
Are we in favor of 90 or 95?
I kind
Because
of like
after-
95.
After
think
you
it-
said 60 football, I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think for the
30 is
bigger
better than
organization,
60.
I think it's gonna make a difference.
Galen, today, is there any mechanism for the commission, the Parks and Rec Commission, to listen to a program that wants to be considered and approve them, and then they become part of that group? Is there the ability for us to do that under today's rules?
I feel like you as the commission can make an exception.
Right. I would think we
Yeah,
could.
yeah, we did for.
We did it for St. Thomas.
Yeah,
So, we have one pressing case. I think we've taken care of anyone else who's come to the commission and asked, right? We have one pressing case, and I don't think there's any way that we're gonna get town attorney change, commission, discussion change. That's not gonna happen in time. And I think the only way to settle this one in any timely manner is through the authority that we have now, which is to create sort of just a model of how would we evaluate this. It could be 5 questions, whatever that is, and ask that organization to come back to the commission in the next meeting and present that.
Why do you not think we can get this done? If we agree here, okay, let's say it's 95% instead of 90, right?
How
We
long
send
did
that
it
to
take
Phil
for the
Peters.
last one? It took, 4 months for the town attorney to?
Well, I mean, why
Marina
can't we,
stuff?
why can't we
Yeah.
tell Phil that, hey, this is timely because girls, residents' seasons hang in the balance here. And we tell him, it's one sentence, right? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but how long does it take to look at one sentence and say, okay, this is,
That's the implications of it, though. I'm in favor of pushing ahead. I'm absolutely in favor of pushing ahead, and I think we all want to do the right thing. Let's try it.
so, but what do we think? Is it 90 or 95%?
I think.
I like the higher number.
I do
for
too.
now.
All right, so let's go 95.
Okay. I'm gonna make
And then what do
that
we want to do on the fees? Is everybody okay with 40? Do we want to go to 50?
I don't know, I'm thinking like 45.
Well, I mean, but I think there should be a difference for out of town, I would think should pay more.
Yeah, they pay $100 an hour.
So they pay $100 an hour.
$100, yeah, they would be the last tier, they pay
No,
$100
on
an
that
hour.
team, the out of towners on that team.
That creates a management
Everybody
idea for
would
you,
pay the
right?
same.
Well, I know guys for softball, out of towners pay, $150 or something like that, right? So there is a
Well,
higher.
but remember that,
They're
you go
registered.
in and register, right? So
Right.
you, Bill, you walk into Parks and Rec and you say, I'm an out-of-towner, I'm playing on the Bombers, I need, I gotta pay and they say, okay, you're an out-of-towner, it's $150. That's easy, but these girls are gonna sign up, they're not gonna sign up with Parks and Rec, they're gonna sign up with Fury.
Yeah. I think you just set the rate to include
Yeah.
that 5%, which is all higher, and you're just raising up on average.
Why don't we go to 50, double the $25 fee? It's less than the $100 per hour. I think it's kind of I don't know if Phil will provide feedback on 50, on the actual number. I don't know if that's his purview. But, you know, maybe the commission says, okay, 50 is not the right number. I personally don't care what the number is, you know?
Start there.
Okay.
But I agree with you, we need to push this forward.
Yeah.
I'm just, based on history, I can't imagine us getting it back from the lawyer by the next meeting.
I know Phil from neighborhood stuff, so I'm gonna reach out to him. What do we need to do to formally get it into his hands for review, you know?
So with the first set of changes, he had asked for Anthony to send them over. So I had kind of mocked up all of our changes in like a edited version,
Mm-hmm.
with like strikeouts and whatnot, sent it to Anthony, and then Anthony sent it over to Philip. So I think I would just need
I'll
specific
email you.
verbiage.
Okay.
I could send it to Anthony, I can CC the group, and then he'll forward it to the
Yeah.
town attorney.
All right.
And do you think he would look at, because all the other stuff doesn't hinge on people's, you know, I mean, the other changes can kind of take their time. This one is more pressing, right?
He
Will
has had the other changes since, January 4th, so he has been sitting on this for a long time. I don't know if he's had the opportunity to review them.
Okay.
I mean, worst case scenario, the season starts, they operate as they have been operating. If he approves it and the commission approves it eventually, then the
Well, but
situation changes.
But how do they operate? Because now they have to pay for fields at $100 an hour.
Right, so I'm just saying, if the change didn't happen prior to the start of the season, they would have to continue doing that until we got permission from the town attorney, and then a full commission vote in favor.
I think we should try and get it done before March.
Well, we'll try. Our meeting is what, March 20th?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we have time.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll send it to
I mean,
you
this should be, in my opinion,
tomorrow.
they should
I work tonight.
be able to approve this in a day, right? Right.
In our world, we think so.
I work for a $4.5 billion organization. This would get done in an hour. I mean, I know we're not dealing with that. I know we're dealing with, government, but I don't see why this should take
We can give them the heads up that we're sending it over.
3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, 2.5 weeks.
It's exactly 3 weeks.
No, it's Thursday.
Yeah, that's 21 days. So, I'm right.
Okay. Okay, anything else before we wrap up here?
Nope.
All right, so just a quick recap on what we're gonna, so you're gonna send this over to Galen, Galen, you're gonna get this to Anthony,
Yes, I'll
the
do
entire
that.
group, and then it's gonna go off to,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
And then, hopefully we have some feedback from him before our meeting, and then, we'll see what the commission says on the plan.
Okay.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
All right, good. Meeting adjourned, motion, do we have to make a motion? We don't have to make a motion, do we?
Yeah, I was gonna ask for public comment.
All right, go for it, Alan.
I'll make it quick. I just want to make 2 points, one on fees. I don't think, I think that maybe the per player category is not the way to go. Why not just keep it as a per hour category and make it a reasonable rate? I mean, $100 is not reasonable. If we looked at the other towns, and we looked at where our organizations similar to us would fall in, I mean, you're looking at anywhere from, I guess, like the $15 per hour rate. Doing that, I think, is gonna deter some of these leagues or these organizations that have massive field time, right? That's gonna be a big differentiation for them. Where as compared to our program or even St. Thomas Tennis, our hours are a fraction of what those bigger organizations are doing. So I think what you're thinking of is like, all right, well, how are these teams, how can we make sure we keep these essentially recreation teams, because that's what FLLGS, that's what fall, that's what FNLL, that's youth football are, right? They're rec teams, just not sponsored by rec. So all the kids should be playing, right? So the amount of hours that they have, if you put them into a per hour category, revenue is gonna go screaming up. So it's going to deter them from now saying, okay, this is not gonna work. But an organization like ours, an organization like St. Thomas, paying something a little bit more reasonable, And also looking at the other towns, just like you did for the field usage rate, the increase, you know, that is an option, I think.
I thought I saw you guys were like 400 hours worth of practice time in field use
Annually,
annually.
which is,
So that's over $6,000, but if you do it at 50 times 70, you're at 3,500. It's a better deal for you to go by player.
it is,
By
I
hour.
agree with you, I'm not
You know.
saying it's not, but if the concern is those bigger groups jumping down, right? If that's the concern, if that's the major concern, I guess, then that's gonna be a real deterrent for them, right? So they're not gonna make that jump down, they're gonna say, oh, that doesn't work for our organization. Because people who are just doing a fraction are gonna do it. And on a side note, I mean, that's comparable to what these other towns are doing, right? So some of these other towns have like 10 different subgroups that you can fall into. And you'll see from their rate usage, right, like it's gradually going up. There's very few that have used that per player category, it's all per hour, but even still the per hour keeps just ticking up. And you'll see the $100 that Galen put forward on the field usage, right, for these for-profit outside organizations, that's what they're paying $100 an hour. But the non-for-profits with that 75 to 85% or 85 to 95%, they're not paying $100 an hour in these other towns. And so, you know, just to go back, I mean, you guys make decisions all the time, right? And sometimes what you look at is what are other towns doing? And at no point in the conversation today, or I think even the conversation in the last committee meeting, was there a conversation of, well, what are other towns doing, right? It just comes back to 100% or not 100%. So in order to kind of find that category of the middle, it's like, yeah, we need another category, because it's really all or nothing around here. You know, so that doesn't work. It doesn't work for female, for youth, girls sports. It's just, there's no place for them. And so, you know, if you continue with that model, girls in this town are going to start to lose opportunities and not gain opportunities. That's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the public? No?
Do you have anybody on the line? Okay.
We're done?
We're done. 4:50 end time. We need that.